They say small towns don't ask many questions. That's why I chose Pine Ridge. A town with a faded main street, a single blinking traffic light, and a diner called Victory Cafe where the jukebox still plays Conway Twitty. I showed up on a Wednesday morning with one duffel bag and a sleeve that didn't quite hide the scar running from my jaw down to my collarbone. No one said anything, not right away. But in towns like these, silence carries weight like a storm waiting behind the sky. Ray, the diner owner, was ex-Marine. He spotted it in me the second I walked in. Not just the way I stood, but how I looked at exits and held still like someone trained to wait. He asked me 2 questions, military and Army or Marines? I said Army. He nodded once, no follow-ups, and handed me an apron. You start tomorrow. The job wasn't supposed to matter. I came to disappear. Just another scarred face pouring coffee and avoiding eye contact. But folks noticed more than they let on. Especially the regulars for old-timers in the corner booth who called themselves the Breakfast Command. One of them, Gary, thought he was funny. What happened to you, Scarface? Your man burned dinner, he'd say, grinning like it was a joke worth laughing at twice. I ignored it. I always did. Until Dean showed up. Dean Wallace wasn't loud like the others. He watched. Tall, quiet, steel-gray beard, the kind of guy who had seen enough to stop talking unless it mattered. He never joked about my scars. But the day my sleeve rode up and revealed part of a tattoo, just a sliver of ink in a pattern no civilian should recognize, froze. Ghost Unit. Most people never heard of it. We weren't supposed to exist. Officially, we died in a training accident in Afghanistan. Truth is, we were sent in blind, set up to fail. They buried the mission along with our names. Or so they thought. Dean didn't say anything right then. But 2 days later, he waited after my shift, slid a photo across the counter. 8 soldiers in desert camo, dusty faces, arms around each other. In the middling. Before the scars. Before the betrayal. I didn't touch the photo. Just stared. They said you died, he said. I shrugged. They wanted that. Things changed after that. Joanne, the other waitress, started looking through my locker. Claimed she had a cousin in the VA who found no record of me. Kyle, youngest of the Breakfast Command, too eager for respect he hadn't earned, ran with it. Stolen valor. He whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. Wearing ink she didn't earn. Then came Brian. He walked in like he owned the place. Joanne's son, back from somewhere, with a dishonorable discharge and a chip on his shoulder. The second he saw me, something changed in his eyes. Recognition, anger, maybe fear. Next day, Kyle cornered me out back. Said his buddy told him I was the one who got Brian kicked out of the Army. Claimed I filed a false report. I didn't. I filed the truth. Brian dragged an Afghan girl into a storage tent. I stopped him. The report stuck. He didn't forgive it. And now, all these years later, they wanted revenge. For justice. Ain't that something? When Kyle grabbed my arm, tried to pin me against the alley wall, I didn't hesitate. Muscle memory took over. Twist, drop, pin. He was on the ground in seconds, arm locked behind him. I whispered, try it again and you'll eat through a straw. Then I let go. By the next morning, Barrett was in town. Colonel James Barrett. Silver hair, sharp eyes, and a past slick with blood and politics. He walked into Victory Cafe like it was a forward base. Didn't say hello. Just dropped a card on the counter. You have something that doesn't belong to you, he said. I didn't blink. Then prove it. Raymond heard everything. He stood behind me and said, my diner, my rules. Barrett didn't like that. But he left. For the moment. Later that night, Dean showed me a folder. Documents. Photos. Maps. Barrett wasn't just covering up a mission gone bad. He was running weapons to insurgents. Our mission was meant to expose it. That's why he sent us in to die. That's why they erased us. And I had the drive. I hadn't looked at it in years. Major Harlow gave it to me before she bled out beside me. If anything happens, make sure this gets out. It held names, routes, bank accounts, everything. And now it was my only leverage. But someone followed me. Joanne again. Barrett's men. Doesn't matter. I found the bug in the napkin holder. Crushed it under my boot. I called an old number. Sullivan. CIA analyst turned whistleblower. I need the favor you owe me, I said. He asked for proof. I said I had it. He gave me a secure server and told me I had 12 hours. Raymond distracted the town with a fake gas leak. I ran to the library, uploaded the drive. Kyle showed up with a car. Said Barrett turned on him too. Guess betrayal has a smell. We made it out, but not far. Barrett's team found us. Cornered me in a half-built house near the edge of town. I faced him one-on-one. Told him the drive was already uploaded, that Sullivan was watching. He called me a traitor. I called him a coward. Then the sheriff pulled up. Documents in hand. Pentagon orders. Barrett was done. They took him away in cuffs. Dean was released. Revami old CO is alive. Found me at a cabin. Wounded, but not broken. She had survived too. We buried our unit's dog tags in the forest. Ghost unit wasn't coming back. But we were still here. 3 weeks later, I walked into Victory Cafe in jeans and a black t-shirt. No apron. No sleeves. Just the scars and the ink. Tommy cheered. Joan offered me a fresh apron. No words, just respect. Raymond handed me a new schedule. More hours. Better pay. Said I belonged. So I stayed. And we built something new. A shelter behind the diner for vets with no place to land. We called it Second Watch. I ran it with Dean. Kyle helped with drywall. Even Joan came around. Some folks still looked at my scars. But others started seeing past them. Started seeing me. That's all I ever wanted. So I'll ask you this. When truth gets buried under politics, under fear, under silence, what would you do? What would you risk to dig it up again? Let me know in the comments. And if you think stories like these matter, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. Because somewhere out there, someone else is still hiding. Maybe they need to hear this. That night, I remember locking the diner door behind me and just standing there on the porch for a long time. The street was quiet, but my mind wasn't. Everything that happened, the accusations, the raid, Barrett's arrest, Dean's sacrifice, Riva reappearing from the dead like a ghost wrapped in truth, it all came crashing down at once. I had been running so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand still. To feel safe. To feel seen. Back in my apartment above the old hardware store, I pulled out the dog tags I kept tucked inside my boot. They weren't mine. They belonged to people who never made it out of that mission. Ghost Company wasn't just a name, you were a promise. A unit built on silence and sacrifice, erased by the very command that trained us. But now, that silence had been broken, and it didn't feel like vengeance. It felt like justice trying to find its legs. A week later, I walked into the Old Glory Diner, not as a waitress, not as a ghost, but as me. Elena Monroe. My scars were uncovered. My tattoo was visible. And for the first time, no one looked away. Tommy yelled from the kitchen, "Look who made it out of CIA purgatory," and handed me a burnt muffin like it was a Medal of Honor. Even Joanne, who once rifled through my locker like a dog with a scent, stood there by the coffee pot and handed me a clean apron. She didn't say much, just nodded and said, "It's still your station if you want it." I took it not because I needed the job, but because I needed the closure. That diner had witnessed my unraveling, and now it was going to witness my rebuilding. Dean was there too. He'd made a full recovery and decided to stay in Millfield instead of taking some cushy VA job in Atlanta. Said real healing happens face-to-face, not over paperwork. He became something like a quiet guardian for the shelter we started, a shelter born from the ruins of a cover-up, now offering warmth and work to veterans slipping through the cracks. We named it Second Watch, a nod to those who take over guard duty when the first shift ends, when the night's darkest but hope still flickers. We turned Raymond's old hardware building into housing. We turned the diner into a second home. And in doing so, we turned pain into purpose. A few months in, a young woman came through our doors. Burned scars, fresh discharge papers, barely 24, and already hollowed out by war. She asked me if it ever got easier. I told her the truth: it doesn't get easier. But you do get stronger. The mirror stops being an enemy. The world stops looking like a threat. And slowly, the silence turns into something else, into story, into strength. And that's what this is, my story. Not the classified version buried under Pentagon files. Not the gossip version Kyle and his buddies cooked up over coffee. But the real one, the one written in scars, in old photos, in late-night cadences sung alone while mopping floors. Colonel Barrett? He's awaiting trial now. Military justice is slow, but it moves. He still believes the machine will protect him. But we're not ghosts anymore. And ghosts, when they speak, carry weight. Riva and I still talk. She's walking again, stubborn as ever. Working on a book, trying to document the full truth before another administration comes in and tries to rewrite it all. She asked me to write the foreword. I haven't said yes yet, but I will. Sometimes at night, I sit on the diner's back steps and look at the stars. Same stars we stared at during patrol rotations in the desert. Same silence, just colder here. And I wonder if the world had just seen us as we were back then, not as pawns, not as liabilities, but as people. How much blood could have been spared? But maybe that's why we're still here. To make sure the next soldier who comes back broken doesn't have to hide, doesn't have to serve coffee just to survive, doesn't have to feel like a ghost. So yeah, maybe I'm just a waitress in a town most folks can't find on a map. But ask around, ask the sheriff, ask Dean, ask Tommy, or that burn-scarred Marine who now smiles like the sun cracked her shell. They'll tell you, ghosts don't die. We rebuild. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like the world tried to silence you, erase your truth? What would you do if the past came knocking and demanded its due? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about justice, scars, and second chances. And if this story meant something to you, share it. Because silence only protects the wrong side. And me? I've been silent long enough. So there I was, seat 2A, 35,000 feet in the sky, sipping nothing but warm water while folks around me were dining on roasted sea bass and white linen service like they were in some high-end bistro. And I just sat there, quiet writing. Not because I didn't care, not because I didn't notice, but because I'd been trained for this, for moments exactly like it. You see, my name's Naomi Hayes. I'm an FAA compliance inspector, and I was riding that flight undercover as part of a broader sweep after a string of unresolved complaints about that airline. I wasn't expecting fireworks. Honestly, I was just doing my job. But what I walked into was something deeper, something personal. Clara Monroe, lead flight attendant for nearly 2 decades, had built her own kingdom up there in first class. She knew who she liked, and she knew who she didn't. And from the second I stepped on board, I could tell he wasn't part of her little kingdom. The first warning sign? The look. You know, that quick up and down some folks give you when they're trying to figure out how you got here. She saw a young black woman in a navy blazer, no flashy jewelry, no designer luggage, and decided I didn't belong. Her smile barely touched her eyes. And that's when I felt it. She'd made a choice about me. She served orange juice to some big shot exec, champagne to the older couple in row 1, offered to warm up the senator aide's croissant, then came to me and barked, "Water." Like I was a stowaway. No options, no smile, just judgment with a side of condensation. I asked, as politely as I could, "What are the available options?" Her lips pursed. "I'll let you know when service begins." Then she walked off without another glance. I didn't react. I opened my notebook, the old leather one with the faint scuffs from past inspections, and started writing. Date, time, interaction tone, eye contact, service level. My job wasn't to cause a scene. My job was to collect the truth. Now here's the thing about truth: it doesn't shout. It accumulates. Like the mold on the bread she eventually served me. A single crusty slice. Bruised fruit. Room temperature water. I took a photo, made another note. She called it service. I called it evidence. At some point, an older woman across the aisle leaned over and whispered, "That doesn't look right, dear." I smiled, told her, "Don't worry. I'm just here to observe." She looked confused but kind. Midway through the flight, Harold, her husband, suddenly slumped forward in his seat. Panic rippled through the cabin. Clara froze. She fumbled. But I didn't. I stepped in, checked his pulse, got nitroglycerin from his coat, stabilized his vitals within 2 minutes. By the time the captain got wind, Harold was already resting easy. His wife gripped my hand and whispered, "Are you a doctor?" I just said, "I have training." I wasn't there to show off. I was there to protect people even when I was being treated like luggage. That moment changed things. Not for Clara, though. She doubled down, ignored my call button, mocked me under her breath to the younger attendant, Jamie, I think her name was. But Jamie, she knew. Her eyes said it all. She saw what was happening, and she hated it. Then came the final descent. That moment when the whole plane seems to hold its breath. I pressed the call button once more, not for food, not for water, but to report my seatbelt was malfunctioning. Again, Clara brushed it off. Said, "You'll be fine." I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Federal Regulation 121.5 317 requires every seatbelt be functional during takeoff and landing. That includes mine. Her face cracked then. Just a flicker. But it was enough. She asked, "Who are you?" I smiled. "We'll get to that." And we did. Minutes before we touched down in San Francisco, the captain made a special announcement. "We have a federal inspector on board. Ms. Hayes has been conducting a compliance evaluation." You could hear a pin drop in that cabin. Clara froze. Jamie gasped. "And the older woman?" She clapped. I stood up, took the handset from Jamie, and introduced myself to the entire first-class cabin. "My name is Naomi Hayes. I work for the FAA. I've documented 12 separate violations on this flight, including discrimination, safety oversights, and deliberate neglect of service protocols." Clara tried to spin it. "This is a setup. She targeted me." But nobody bought it. Not the CEO in 3A, not the actor still holding his phone with the video footage, not the retired judge in 1C who was already giving her statement to a ground agent before the jet bridge locked. When we deplaned, Clara was escorted off separately by 2 FAA officers. She was trying to argue all the way down the jet bridge something about 18 years of service and just one bad day. But me? I wasn't listening. I was busy turning in my evidence to the FAA ground team waiting at Gate 34B. Funny thing is, this wasn't about Clara. Not really. This was about the system that let her think she could get away with it. The HR department that buried 23 complaints. The internal emails that said, "Just give her a warning, she's got friends on the board." The airline that thought image was more important than integrity. We changed that. Not overnight. But over the next few months, policies were rewritten, training was overhauled, complaints were audited, and dozens of previously dismissed passengers finally got justice. Even Jamie? She applied to join the FAA's new compliance unit. I wrote her a letter of recommendation myself. And as for me, I got promoted. Not that titles matter much. What matters is when I board a flight, now any flight, I see something different in the crew's eyes. A hesitation before assuming, a second thought before judging. That's the real win. Not punishment. Progress. Now, I'm not gonna lie. I still think about my mom, Vanessa Hayes, the only black female aircraft mechanic at her company in the 90s. I remember the way she was treated on flights back then, like she didn't belong, like she was intruding on someone else's comfort. She died before she could see any of this. But I carry her with me every mile I fly. And if you've ever been dismissed, overlooked, or made to feel small because of how you look or who they think you are, let me tell you, you're not alone. And change is possible, but it takes people who are willing to write things down. Quietly, patiently, powerfully. So next time you board a flight, look around. Watch who gets offered champagne and who gets handed a moldy apple. It tells you a lot about where we are and where we still need to go. And hey, if this story got you thinking, don't just scroll. Share your thoughts in the comments. Ever been treated unfairly on a flight? Ever witnessed someone else get put down for no reason? Let's talk about it. Because justice doesn't happen in silence, and change always starts with conversation. Hit like, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay sharp, stay kind, and never stop taking notes.